That's the highest level of woman you can get to be loyal to you. You're not high value. But if you can get a woman who is up there, has plenty of options, and is inaccessible, highly loyal, if you can get that woman to submit to you, that's when you're high level. So if you want to know whether you're a high value man, look at the highest level of women you can get to totally be loyal to you. And if it's low, you're not that high value. And the other thing that they do that I find really bizarre is they take low value women and kind of like speak to them badly and teach men to disrespect their woman, like to kind of be rude to them and not give them too much and give them less. But this was what truly high value men do. They pick wisely. They pick super, super wisely. They're highly selective with the women that they choose. And then when they've chosen her correctly, they spoil her endlessly. They put her through the ringers. It's like, you know, when you go to 6-7 rounds of an interview to get into those corporate jobs, they make you go through interview after interview after interview, a bit like going to a Harvard application. When you get to Harvard, they treat you well. Your life is set. But up until that point, they put you through it. What Fresh and Fit teach is take any kind of woman and then don't give her too much, play games, treat her harshly. That's not what high-value men do. They've got a reputation. They can't just take any old girl and then try and train her. They ain't got time for that. They take a woman who's been well trained by her family.
That's amazing. Like, I've never seen it from that perspective before. Like well trained by her family. I mean,
that's your dad's job.
That's gonna get a lot of people's backs up, especially so obviously there might be some women that listen to this that might not have had a dad. And the dad might not have been around. Mm. And I've noticed that from my own dating life that if I've dated a girl who's come from and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, he's like a broken home, and the dad's been absent for periods of time, the level of trauma that girl's got in her life has made it more difficult and has brought up triggers within me from my childhood. Absolutely. So how does that affect a woman then, not having a father? Here's
the thing. What a lot of men and women do, when they have an absent father, they remove the pain of it by destroying his reputation. By saying, I hate him. He was a prick. He was this. He was that. Fine. He might be Ted Bundy. He might be the worst person on the planet. It doesn't change the fact that you needed 2 parents growing up. And the lack of one parent is still traumatic. So how they defend themselves is by saying they didn't need their dad. They don't care about their dad. No worries. No one's suggesting that you did, but it still causes a trauma in a child. And the trauma, you only realize the trauma mostly when they try and get into relationships. And there's a level of fear of abandonment that you can't soothe them with. Sometimes you just can't soothe them. They just might be overly anxious that you're going to leave them. They might be overly independent and think, I don't need you, because you might leave at any point. They might be easily triggered. And you're thinking, I'm doing my best. What's wrong with her? Why won't she calm down? Children need 2 parents. And when they don't have that, they don't regulate their emotions correctly as an adult. And it's hyper triggered when they're in a relationship and they're finally in love. That's when they behave their worst.
So essentially what you're saying is by having an absent parent, mother or father, you create a chemical imbalance in your brain that now makes you harder to date when you get older, unless you deal with your traumas.
Unless you deal with it.
So if there's people listening to this podcast, that male or female, that have been through this where a parent has been absent, they believe on the surface that they've dealt with it.
Yeah. They'll say, I'm fine. I don't need him. I don't think about him. They think it's about him. They don't think it's about the impact it's had on their psychology.
So how can they then do the inside work on a psychological level so that they can attract the partner? Because I know there's one girl specifically that listens to this podcast, and that's a friend of mine, and she dates the same kind of men all the time, and then complains about these type of men on a constant cycle. Yeah. What trigger does she have to break in order to break that?
It does depend on the type of wound the dad left. If it was just abandonment, they might and they never met him, they might go for a man a lot older and they're seeking somebody to create that kind of father, masculine figure if they never met him. If it was somebody who was abusive and then left, they'll look for somebody who is equally abusive, makes them earn their love and stuff. So it does depend on the type of trauma. But here's what I would say to start with. You have both sides of the story. I've had too many times where I've witnessed women brainwash children and deprive men of access to their children and brainwash that child. And that child grows up completely and utterly loyal to their mum. And with that loyalty, you have to sacrifice objectivity. In order to be completely loyal to your brainwashing mother, you have to be naive about women. And that sets them up terribly. I always find men who grew up with just their mum and no access to their father and no access to the dad's side of the story are more likely to be cheated on.
Repeat that again.
So men who grew up with just their mother and had no access to the dad in any way, didn't understand the dad's side of the story, was just told that dad was terrible, they're more likely to be cheated on by their partners. And the reason being is if they had access to dad and they saw for their own eyes that dad's a bit, he's a bit of a mess, it's not so bad. But when they don't even have access, mum just moved them away, just separated them, got courts involved. What happens there? What happens there is they start to put women on a pedestal. They think women don't lie. Women tell the truth. And they also don't see wife behavior. They don't see that wives are supposed to, come home at a certain time, check in or anything like that. They just see an independent woman. So when they meet women, they're naive. They think women don't lie. Women tell the truth. Men are bad. Yeah, that's how they see the world. And then they also don't know the protocol of what a married woman should be like, that she should check in. Whereas when you live with mum and dad, you see mum doesn't go out so much at night. And you see that mum's a bit annoying as well. Poor dad, she's a bit rude to him. You see both sides of it. You see how annoying mum can be. But when you get no access to that, you become totally naive about the severity of some women.
So what is a high-value woman?
I would just say a high-value woman is determined by the level of men she can say no to and resist. What I mean by that is if she can have really low-value men and she's just saying no to them, she's not that high-value. So low-value men, you're saying no, it's not that deep. But if you can get top-tier men who are all after you and you're still selective, you're a high-value woman.
By top tier, you mean?
Men that have an incredible amount of options and they're looking to not just sleep with you, to be with you, and you still are selective.
And why do you think that in today's society we've gone away from this traditional marriage, traditional relationships? There's now open relationships. There's all these different genders and sexes and all this other stuff that's going on. I'm sure we can talk about and the psychology behind that. But what's the go with all that?
I do think it's deliberate. I do think it's like structurally programmed. I do think it's deliberate, but I would give a lot of the credit to pornography. I would give a lot of the credit for why marriages are breaking down to pornography, because it teaches men and women desires that are completely against the requirements of a marriage and monogamy. So it teaches men to enjoy a lot of threesomes, teaches women to enjoy that. It teaches abuse. It teaches degradation. It teaches how important sex has to be in a marriage. And if it doesn't feel like this, it's pointless. What it does is it completely destroys the traditional values that are required for a long-lasting, monotonous, endless marriage. So a typical marriage actually does get boring sexually, actually does require some tradition. It requires you to be a bit of a prude and this, that, and the other, because you have to self-regulate. You have to be in self-control. What porn does is say, indulge in every desire you could possibly have. That doesn't set you up for a lifetime of marriage.
By porn being in any vicinity of a relationship, you are increasing your chance of divorce?
I would say so. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think in any... the thing is, there's been no research that suggests it has any positive consequences. None. What people think, but it lightens up your sex life and it lightens... But here's the thing. Having a really bright sex life isn't actually an essential ingredient for marriage. An active sex life, a continuous, dedicated sex life is. When you brighten up your sex life, it then becomes difficult to accept monotonous and accept, stable sex. So brightening it up doesn't actually create long-lasting sex in a marriage.
So if you are a man listening to this and your goal at the moment, you're between 20 and 35, for argument's sake, and you want to smash business and smash life and really send it so that in your 40s you're set up and you're well and you're doing the things that you want to move different in that time zone, what would you be saying? Should they be looking for a partner now, or should they just be in the relentless pursuit of their goals and then the partner will align at the right time?
It's very tricky for men, because here's the thing. The reality is having a woman really does tick that box off. So the distraction of women calms down slowly. When you're totally single, every weekend you have to think, what table are we getting? What holiday are we going on? You have to think about these things, like how are we getting girls? Because, you don't want to go out and this, that, and the other without a girl. And when you have someone, that box is kind of ticked off, so that distraction is off. But at the same time, you also need to dedicate yourself to your goals. So it's very difficult to manage both. And sometimes what can happen is when a man meets a woman when he's not quite where he should be, and then his career flourishes, they're no longer compatible because he's become really, really dedicated and hardworking. And she may not have, because she was just supporting him. They're now intellectually less intimate. So it's very difficult for men. I would say it's very difficult to choose. But what I would say is not so much whether you have a partner or whether you don't have a partner. It's more whether you have discipline or don't have discipline with women. Do you have discipline with women? If it is a case, I don't have time for a partner, I'm only going to have casual relationships, but I'm not going to go spending thousands on a table, going to be really thirsty when I get into a club, think I need it. Discipline with that. If I have it, I have it. If I don't, I don't. I've got to focus. But if you don't have discipline, whether you're in a relationship, outside a relationship, you're not going to reach your goals because it will trickle over into your financial success.